Jet fuel prices are exploding. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively blockaded. Airlines around the world are cutting flights, grounding aircraft, and hoarding every dollar of cash they have. And in the middle of all this chaos, one budget airline just walked into a factory in Canada and ordered 150 brand-new jets. $19 billion. Not the A320neo it has flown for over 2 decades. Not the Boeing 737. A plane that low-cost airlines have almost universally avoided. A plane whose engines have grounded hundreds of aircraft worldwide. A plane that, just a few years ago, almost didn't survive at all. The Airbus A220. On paper, this order makes no sense. But stay with me, because behind this crazy decision hides one of the smartest fleet moves in modern aviation. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why Airbus practically had no choice but to say yes to everything AirAsia demanded. May 6, 2026. Mirabel, Canada. Home of the Airbus A220 final assembly line. AirAsia signs a firm order for 150 A220-300s, valued at roughly $19 billion at list prices, with the flexibility to grow that commitment to 300 aircraft. It is the single largest firm order in the entire history of the A220 program, and it finally pushes the aircraft past a milestone Airbus has been chasing for years: 1,000 total firm orders. The signing wasn't some quiet corporate ceremony either. The Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, personally attended. So did the Premier of Quebec. When a plane order brings out heads of government, you know this is bigger than one airline buying jets. And we'll come back to the politics later, because that part is fascinating. And there's a twist buried in the announcement. AirAsia isn't just becoming a new A220 customer. It's becoming the launch customer for a version of this plane that nobody has ever flown. A high-density configuration with 160 seats. The standard A220-300 is certified for a maximum of 149 passengers. To squeeze in 11 more, Airbus is adding an extra overwing emergency exit on each side of the fuselage. First deliveries are expected in 2028, rolling off the line in Quebec and heading straight into the most competitive low-cost market on the planet, Southeast Asia. But here's the question everyone in the industry immediately asked. Why would an ultra-low-cost carrier, an airline famous for flying one aircraft family to keep costs brutally low, suddenly add a completely new type to its fleet? During the worst fuel crisis in years? To answer that, you first need to understand what the A220 actually is. Because this plane has one of the strangest backstories in aviation. The A220 wasn't born in Airbus. It was born in Canada as the Bombardier CSeries, a clean-sheet design meant to do something audacious. Beat Boeing and Airbus at their own game in the 100 to 150 seat market. And technically, Bombardier succeeded. The CSeries was a genuinely brilliant aircraft. Carbon fiber wings, the widest cabin in its class, huge windows, and geared turbofan engines promising double-digit fuel savings. Pilots loved it. Passengers loved it. The market? Not so much. Airlines hesitated to bet on a small manufacturer with no global support network. Sales crawled. The program nearly bankrupted Bombardier. Development costs ballooned by billions. Then came the killer blow. In 2017, Boeing filed a trade complaint in the United States, claiming Bombardier was dumping the CSeries below cost. Washington responded with tariffs of nearly 300%, effectively locking the plane out of the American market overnight. Bombardier was cornered, and in one of the great plot twists in aviation history, it handed majority control of the CSeries program to Airbus. for the grand price of $1. Airbus got a world-class aircraft. It didn't have to develop. Boeing, in trying to kill a small competitor, gift-wrapped it for its biggest rival. Rebranded as the A220, the plane finally had global sales muscle behind it. But even then, orders came slowly. Delta, Air France, Swiss, JetBlue. Respectable names, but mostly full-service airlines using it as a comfortable regional workhorse. By early 2026, roughly 500 had been delivered to about 25 operators. Solid, not spectacular. What the A220 never cracked was the segment that buys planes by the hundreds. Ultra-low-cost carriers. Too small, too premium, too complicated to add to an existing fleet. Until now. Because AirAsia's 150 plane order did more for this program in one evening than years of Airbus salesmanship. The question is, why did AirAsia say yes when every other budget airline said no? Let's be brutally honest about why this order looks irrational. There are 4 big reasons. Reason 1, the timing. The industry is in crisis mode. After the effective blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, jet fuel prices went vertical. Airlines everywhere are slashing schedules and deferring deliveries. Aviation analysts politely called AirAsia's timing interesting, which, in industry speak, means, have you lost your minds? Reason 2, the aircraft itself. The A220 has never been a low-cost carrier's plane. Yes, it's efficient. Yes, it has the lowest fuel burn and the longest range in its class. But ultra-low-cost airlines live and die by one rule: maximum seats, minimum complexity. An aircraft with around 130 to 150 seats simply couldn't spread costs across enough passengers. That's why you see budget giants flying A320s, A321s, and 737s, and almost never A220s. Reason 3? The engines. The A220 flies exclusively on Pratt Whitney geared turbofans, the same engine family whose durability problems have grounded hundreds of aircraft across the industry in recent years. There is no alternative engine option. For a budget airline, a plane sitting on the ground isn't an inconvenience. It's a hole in the business model, burning cash every single day. We'll dig deeper into this risk in a few minutes. And reason 4, fleet complexity. AirAsia built an empire on one idea, the Airbus A320 family, and nothing else. One type rating for pilots, one pool of mechanics, one inventory of spare parts, one simulator program. Adding a second aircraft family breaks the most sacred rule in the low-cost playbook. So, terrible timing, the wrong aircraft, risky engines, and broken fleet logic. 4 strikes. Case closed? Not even close, because there's one factor that flips this entire story on its head, and it's hiding in Airbus's own order books. Here's the part most headlines completely missed. AirAsia doesn't just want new planes, it needs them. The group still operates a fleet of aging A320 CEOs, older generation jets burning significantly more fuel than modern equivalents. In a world of crisis-level fuel prices, every month those planes keep flying costs real money. They have to be replaced. Soon. The obvious answer would be more A320neos. The plane AirAsia already knows inside and out. One problem. The A320neo is a victim of its own success. The order backlog is so enormous that meaningful delivery slots now stretch into the first half of the 2030s. Order today, and you're waiting the better part of a decade. Boeing? Its 737 MAX backlog is just as brutal, and switching manufacturers would cost AirAsia a fortune in retraining and infrastructure. The A220? Deliveries begin in 2028, 2 years away. Suddenly, the illogical choice becomes the only realistic one. It's not that AirAsia fell in love with the A220. It's that the A220 is the only modern jet on the market with real production capacity in a time frame that actually matters. Analysts spotted this immediately. Officially, this order is about a bold new network strategy. Unofficially, it's very likely a replacement plan for the aging fleet, dressed up in strategic language. But here's the thing. Even if necessity forced the choice, AirAsia is turning it into genuine strategy. The plan is a 3-layer fleet. The A220s take over shorter and thinner routes across Southeast Asia and into Central Asia, markets where a 236-seat A321 is simply too much airplane. That frees the A320s and A321s for denser mid-haul trunk routes. And the wide-body A330s get pushed onto long-haul flights to Europe, Australia, and North America. Tony Fernandes has a name for this: the world's first true low-cost network carrier. Every aircraft sized precisely to its route. No wasted seats, no wasted fuel, higher frequencies on busy routes, and new destinations where bigger jets could never make money. Now let's talk about those 160 seats, because this is where AirAsia is quietly rewriting the economics of the entire A220 program. In the low-cost world, everything reduces to one number: cost per seat. The flight costs what it costs. Fuel, crew, airport fees, maintenance. Every additional seat slices that fixed cost into smaller pieces. It's the entire reason budget airlines exist. The standard A220-300 tops out at 149 passengers. AirAsia's version will carry 160. That's roughly 7% more seats, meaning roughly 7% lower cost per passenger. From the exact same airframe, the same fuel burn, the same 2 pilots. For an airline selling $10 promotional fares, that's not a rounding error. That's the difference between a route making money and losing it. The extra capacity comes from that additional overwing emergency exit on each side. A regulatory unlock that lets the cabin be certified for more evacuating passengers. It's a classic AirAsia move. Take an aircraft designed for comfort and industrialize it. But Fernandes didn't stop there. At the signing ceremony, in front of the cameras and the Prime Minister of Canada, he publicly turned to Airbus and applied pressure. Build the stretched A220-500, a roughly 185-seat version. And AirAsia will buy another 150 aircraft on top of this order. Think about what that means. AirAsia already holds options to expand to 300 jets. Stack that promise on top, and one airline is dangling potentially hundreds of aircraft in front of Airbus. Enough volume to justify launching an entirely new variant of the plane. A 185-seat A220-500 would essentially replace the A321 for one, with better economics. AirAsia isn't just buying planes anymore. It's trying to shape what Airbus builds next. And with the largest A220 order in history as leverage, Airbus has every reason to listen. Now, for the elephant in the room, the engines. Because this is the single biggest risk hanging over this entire $19 billion bet. Every A220 is powered by Pratt Whitney's geared turbofan. There is no alternative option. No CFM, no Rolls-Royce. And the geared turbofan family has spent the last several years at the center of one of the biggest reliability crises in modern aviation. Durability problems that forced inspections and repairs across the global fleet, grounding hundreds of aircraft and leaving airlines scrambling. The core issue for operators isn't just that engines need fixing, it's time on wing. Engines coming off the wing for shop visits far earlier than promised. And repair shops so backed up that planes sit idle for months, waiting for parts. For a full-service airline, that's painful. For an ultra-low-cost carrier whose entire model depends on flying each aircraft as many hours a day as physically possible, it's potentially fatal. So why would AirAsia accept that risk? 3 reasons. First, Pratt Whitney has developed fixes for the known issues. The bottleneck now is manufacturing enough upgraded parts, and by 2028, when AirAsia's first jets arrive, the worst of that backlog should be behind the industry. Second, the deal reportedly includes long-term engine maintenance support from Pratt Whitney itself, shifting a chunk of the risk from the airline back onto the engine maker. And third, and this is pure Fernandes, risk is exactly when things get cheap. An aircraft program with a bruised reputation. An engine maker desperate to rebuild trust. A manufacturer hungry for a breakthrough order. That is maximum negotiating leverage. Analysts openly joke that AirAsia must have gotten a heck of a deal. Far, far below the $19 billion list price. Buying at the bottom is how AirAsia has always played. Still, if those engines underperform in the hot, humid, high-cycle conditions of Southeast Asia, this entire strategy comes under pressure. That's the honest caveat. One more layer to this story. Why was the Prime Minister of Canada standing at that signing table? Because the A220 is assembled in Mirabel, Quebec. It's the crown jewel of Canada's aerospace industry, employing thousands. Quebec has poured hundreds of millions into keeping the program alive. For Ottawa, a massive order from Asia is proof that Canadian aerospace can win global export markets. Exactly the economic message the government wants to send. Politically, everyone at that table needed this deal. Airbus needed the milestone. Canada needed the win. And AirAsia needed the planes. When all sides need a deal, the buyer holds the cards. And that's the pattern of Tony Fernandes's entire career. He bought AirAsia for less than $1 in 2001, days after 9/11, when aviation looked dead. He placed huge aircraft orders during downturns when manufacturers were desperate. His own words at the ceremony, "People will wonder why AirAsia is buying so many planes during this crisis." But crises are exactly when you make bold moves. Because wars don't last forever. It's a philosophy that has made him one of aviation's most successful contrarians. It has also, at times, nearly broken his company. The pandemic pushed AirAsia's long-haul arm to the edge of collapse. Bold works. Until it doesn't. So, is this order really against all logic? On the surface, absolutely. A budget airline, buying a premium small jet with troubled engines in the middle of a fuel crisis, breaking its own single-fleet rule that built the company. But peel back one layer and you find cold, ruthless calculation. The only modern jet available before the 2030s. Densified to a record 160 seats. Almost certainly bought at crisis-level discounts. With maintenance risk pushed back onto the engine maker. And a public ultimatum that could force Airbus to build an entirely new aircraft. Sometimes the boldest move in aviation isn't buying planes when times are good. It's signing for 150 of them when everyone else is too scared to pick up the pen. So here's my question for you. Did AirAsia just make the deal of the decade? Or a $19 billion mistake? Drop your take in the comments. I read all of them. And if you want to know what happens if Airbus actually pulls the trigger on the A220-500, subscribe. Because that story is only just beginning. Just beginning.